So I was brainstorming ways that I could upgrade the $100 Wilhelt deck that I had brewed in the previous video, and Reanimation sounded like a really great way to do that. So my thought process started with the Gravecrawler, a very obvious include for these types of decks, and Razorlash Transmorgant is actually a really sweet option that we can use too. I started thinking to myself, how can I get this Gravecrawler on the battlefield as fast as possible in order to start accruing some value with Wilhelt? That's when Vile Entomber stuck out to me as a really cool way to search my library for a card and put that card into my graveyard. So I started looking for other cards that can help me do that. Stuff like Auric Lore Mage, Unmarked Grave, Final Pardoning is super sweet for this kind of a deck. And I started thinking to myself, why not use those graveyard tutors in conjunction with reanimation spells, and that way I can get pretty much any creature I want in my graveyard and then onto the battlefield. We got some really sweet options, stuff like Liliana Untouched by Death, which can actually let us cast our zombies from our graveyard, which we do have a little bit of a combo with that. We'll get that a little bit later. Having Golich lets us cast stuff from our graveyard. Phyrexian Delver is going to let us get stuff from our graveyard as well. And then some usual suspects for reanimation, stuff like Persist, Reanimate, and then Animate Dead plus a Necromancy. One of the sweet to graveyard tutors we have in the deck is the Buried Alive, and that's because we can search for Mikaeus, Rothulk plus Sidisi to get an insane amount of value out of the deck. Once we have these three zombies in our graveyard, we can reanimate the Rothulk, and the ETB is going to reanimate Sidisi plus Mikaeus the Unhallowed. When Sidisi enters a battlefield, you can have it exploit itself so you can search for any card in your library. And because Mikaeus gives it Undying, our Sidisi is going to enter the battlefield again, and we can exploit it again if we really want to. And once we search for any two cards in our library, the world is your oyster. We can do stuff like searching for Sacrifice Outlet, so we can sacrifice the Rothulk again, and then that's going to have Undying, so that's going to re-enter the battlefield. Rothulk enters, that's just going to bring back our Sidisi and whatever other creatures we have in our graveyard, and the Sidisi can then tutor for 2 more cards in our deck. This interaction is probably going to be the basis for the EDH version of Wilhelt I brewed, so if you're interested in seeing when that deck gets posted, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. We do have the traditional Gravecrawler combos in the deck, stuff like Pitiless Plunderer, as well as the Phyrexian Altar, Ashnod's Altar, where we sacrifice our Gravecrawler, and that's going to trigger our Wilhelt, and we're going to make a zombie, and from there we can recast our Gravecrawler with the mana that we made from Pitiless Plunderer, and potentially make an infinite amount of mana. Now we have cards like Ayara, Diregraph Captain, as well as the Plague Belcher that will allow us to ping the table when we get that combo set up. Poppet Stitcher is another really sweet one. The main thing we care about here is the backside, since the backside is going to make all of our creature tokens lose abilities, and Wilhelt is just going to start making an infinite amount of zombies if you have a sack outlet like Carrion Feeder. Undead Alchemist is another card that I really like to throw in these types of decks. We do have the Altar of the Brood, and this is going to be a really cool combo. So essentially what's going to happen is we're going to have a creature enter the battlefield. Each player is going to mill a card, and then as long as you hit one creature, you're going to have each player mill one more card, because the Undead Alchemist is going to create a 2/2 zombie. As long as players keep milling creatures, you're going to mill out everyone's decks. So I want to move away from the combos for just a second. I want to talk about some of the more mid-range type of cards we have in the deck. Obviously, Wilhelt allows us to draw a card at the beginning of our in-step. Cards like Ayara, Braids the Arisen Nightmare is a super sweet card from Dominaria that will allow us to draw a ton of cards potentially. Scarab God is another really great option. It allows us to get into that mid-game really well. Our sorceries are really straightforward and just kind of play onto this game plan of getting things into our graveyard, reanimating them. The Fabricate's going to be great for tutoring for a good bit of the artifacts in our deck. But the big one I want to highlight here is the Awaken the Erstwhile, which is going to force everyone to discard their hands, and everyone's going to make a 2/2 black zombie for each card they discarded this way. The cool thing about that is that Wilhelt is going to let us draw extra cards, and hopefully at that point we can outvalue our opponents with our commander. Moving up from that lower power version we had in the previous video, we've just upgraded our interaction. We've had a little bit more interaction to help protect our combo and stop our opponents from doing any crazy shenanigans. And with our rocks, we've lowered the average CNC so we can curve out a little bit better. A super sweet artifact in this deck that I don't see a lot of Wilhelt decks running is this Pyro of Heroes, and this card is actually kind of insane. Since we can sacrifice the tokens that Wilhelt makes, and just immediately find our Gravecrawler. And then later, when you sacrifice the Gravecrawler, you can use the other token to find a carry-on feeder. So we've got the 2 Reanimation enchantments in our deck, but we've also got this Necro Duality, which I did not realize until I was making this video, but there is another combo we can do with the Necro Duality. So whenever a non-token zombie enters the battlefield under your control, you get to make a copy of it. This is going to be a little bit expensive, but work with me here. So we've got the Rot Hulk. When the Rot Hulk enters the battlefield, we can reanimate other zombies, but in response to our Necro Duality trigger, we can sacrifice the Rot Hulk with one of our sacrifice outlets, and then our Rot Hulk will be in the graveyard, and then we're going to make a token of the Rot Hulk, which can then bring back the original Rot Hulk. You can do that infinitely and just ping the table with something like a Diagraph Captain. Now we've got the classic Rooftop Storm, which is going to combo with our Liliana Untouched by Death that we kind of alluded to a little bit earlier in the video. Now there's some really interesting interactions we have with this combo. We can do stuff like Fleshbag Marauder, where we will sacrifice the Fleshbag to its own ability, and then we can cast it for free, and then do that over and over and over again. We can ping the table with something like a Diagraph Captain. Or if we have a sacrifice outlet like the Carry-On Feeder, we can just cast our Grey Merchant of Asphodel forever. And if you've been watching my videos for any kind of while, you'll know that as I'm upgrading my mana base, I'm thinking about lands that can enter the battlefield untapped a little bit more consistently. Not to say that we need all of our lands entering the battlefield untapped at this power level, but we do want to think about that. Thanks for checking out the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like the video and you want to get updated for when the CEDH version of Wilhelt is going to be released.